I never paid much attention to the bathroom mirror before. It was the same plain slab of glass mounted above the sink that had been there since I moved into this apartment 2 years ago. The silvering around the edges was a little worn, giving it that faint smoky halo that most people would probably call character. I just saw it as something I looked into when brushing my teeth or fixing my hair. Before work it began with something so small that I almost convinced myself I imagined I had been. Rinsing my face late one night, the tap still running, as I leaned in close to the basin, and when I glanced up in the mirror, I thought my reflection was a fraction of a second late. Not much, just enough that it felt like watching an old video with a slightly bad connection where the audio and video were a little out of sync. My hands froze in the water. The sound of the tap became loud and hollow in the small tiled space, and I stared into the glass until my own damp face stared back perfectly in. Time with me again. I blamed exhaustion. It had been a long week. I shut off the water and didn't think about it again until 2 nights later when it happened again. This time I was brushing my teeth. I spit into the sink, looked up, and saw my mirrored self still holding the toothbrush in my mouth for a moment longer than I had a beat. Later the motion matched again. A smear of foam clung to the corner of my reflected mouth that I swiped away instinctively. But in the mirror the foam stayed a moment before vanishing, as if the reflection had only then decided to copy me. It bothered me enough that I touched the glass. It was cool and perfectly solid, no vibration, no shift in the image except for the way my fingertips met themselves in the flat surface. My pulse was louder in my ears than it should have been for something so trivial. I went to bed trying to think of how mirrors worked, maybe light bouncing around, maybe my mind playing tricks because I had been staring too hard. Maybe over the next week I became aware of the bathroom as a place I didn't want to linger in after dark and daylight. The mirror behaved as expected. It showed what I did exactly when I did it at night, though. When I got home late and tired and switched on the harsh overhead light, I began noticing more delays. Sometimes my head would turn, but the reflection lagged half a breath. Sometimes my arm would lower, and its movement felt like a replay of my own moments after they passed. I tried blinking fast in the mirror to see if it kept up. It usually did. Usually one night around midnight, I went in just to test it. I faced myself square on in the mirror and stood perfectly still. The light buzzed faintly above me. The tiles were cold under my bare feet. I waited 30 seconds, then suddenly jerked my head to the side. The reflection did too, but not quite as sharply, almost like it was reluctant to move the way I told it to. I told myself it was nothing, but my heart was thudding as I turned to leave, and I swear, as I stepped out of the bathroom, just in the corner of my eye, the reflection didn't turn away with me. It kept facing forward, watching after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something in the mirror that wasn't just me. I avoided looking into it at night, but habit is strong. Every time I washed my hands, I caught myself glancing up and feeling that prickling behind my eyes, like I was being sized up, measured. One morning, bright sunlight coming through the small window, I leaned into. Shave, no delay, no wrongness. I almost laughed at myself. And then in that moment between swiping the razor down my cheek and lifting it away, the reflection's eyes blinked, not mine, just one of the left, one slow, deliberate, while my own eyes were wide open. I froze, the razor trembling in my hand. I told myself I must have blinked without noticing. It happens, your brain fills in gaps. But for the rest of the day, I kept replaying it in my mind, one eye closing like a signal or a secret. That night, when I went to brush my teeth, I tried an experiment. I stared directly into my own eyes in the glass and didn't move. The overhead light hummed somewhere outside. A car passed. I didn't blink. For as long as I could, my eyes stung, watered the moment I Finally blinked my reflection, didn't it just stared at me unblinking for 3 long seconds before the eyelids slid down and back up slowly. I put the toothbrush down and left the bathroom without rinsing my mouth, foam clinging to my teeth as I shut the door behind me the next day. I avoided the mirror completely. I used the hallway mirror instead when I needed to check my tie before work. That one was smaller and mounted at an angle where I couldn't stand directly in front of it for long without feeling silly. It behaved normally. I started thinking about covering the bathroom mirror, maybe replacing it, but the idea of touching it again made my stomach knot. It was ridiculous. It was glass and silver backing. It wasn't alive yet. At night when I lay in bed, I would hear faint clicks from the bathroom, like the sound of fingernail tapping glass. Once then again, after a pause, I told myself it was the pipes, the building settling. Anything else a week passed like this, I noticed I'd started closing the bathroom door all the way every night before bed, even when I went in during the day. I moved quickly, kept my eyes on the sink or the floor, and got out until last Tuesday. I had been working late and didn't get home until almost 2. In the morning, the apartment was silent. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the bathroom because I felt sweaty and wanted to wash up before sleeping. The air inside was cooler, the light harsher after hours of darkness. I leaned in over the sink and splashed water on my face. When I looked up, the reflection smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too slow, too wide. My own lips stayed pressed together, but the me in the glass showed teeth. Not perfectly my teeth, either. Something about them looked sharper, more crowded. The smile lasted only a second before the reflection's face snapped back to matching mine exactly. I didn't breathe, didn't move. My ears rang. Then I stepped back and without looking away reached behind me for the light switch. The moment the bathroom went dark, I turned and left. I locked the door to my bedroom for the first time in my life that night. I don't know if I slept. I remember lying there with my eyes closed, hearing tiny irregular clicks from the other room, like fingernails on glass. The first time I realized the reflection was studying me instead of copying me. I was brushing my teeth. It was early in the morning, the kind of half-conscious moment where you do not really notice your own movements. My head was tilted down, rinsing the foam from my mouth, and I glanced up expecting to see myself doing the same. But the mirrored me was staring straight at me, its head perfectly still, the toothbrush frozen mid-air. My own arm was moving, but it was not for a long breath. I simply stood there, toothpaste burning the inside of my cheek, try to convince myself that I was looking at some strange trick of timing, like maybe my brain had lagged behind the movement and the reflection was already in the next frame of reality. But then the mirrored me tilted its head ever so slightly, not in sync with me, not at all like me. I blinked hard. I raised my arm higher, and it stayed still. I dropped my arm, and it finally moved, but slower, like it was choosing to respond. I told myself to get a grip. There were reasons for things, glass warps, light bends. I was tired. That was all for the next few days. I tried to ignore the mirror. I avoided looking directly at it. When I washed up, I stood sideways. When I brushed my hair, but that constant itch between my shoulder blades told me I was still being watched. Even without looking, I could feel it, its attention pulling at the edges of me like invisible fingers curling around the back of my skull. The dream started, then not loud, not dramatic, just unsettling flashes. The mirror in my bathroom, standing in the middle of the dark hallway where it did not belong, my reflection in it, smiling with lips too tight to be mine, and the eye that I lingering wide open while the rest of the face went slack. One night, I woke up to the sound of dripping, not the pipes, not the sink in the kitchen. It was close, rhythmic, slow. I followed it into the bathroom. But when I turned the light on everything was. Bone dry except for a single bead of water running down the glass. Right over the reflections, I had slid down unnaturally slow, almost like it was resisting gravity. My skin prickled. I wiped it away with my hand towel, and the glass was suddenly cold, so cold it hurt. The next morning, I decided to test something. I stood in front of the mirror, very still, staring at my own eyes. The left one blinked. When I blinked the right one, though, it hesitated, not much, just a fraction of a second delay, but enough to make my stomach knot. I repeated the blink again, and every time the right, I lagged like there was a loose connection between us. After that, I could not stop noticing other things my reflected eyes did not quite focus on. Where mine did, if I glanced at the corner of the counter, its eyes stayed fixed on me. Sometimes when I turned to leave the bathroom, I caught the faintest suggestion that the mirrored me was still facing forward, even as I pivoted away, like it did not want to lose sight of me. On the fourth night after this began, I had the dream again, but this time I could not move. I was standing in front of the mirror, my reflection breathing just a little faster than me. The sound was loud, ragged, and then without warning, it raised a hand and pressed its palm to the glass. My real hand stayed at my side, but I felt the same cold sting on my skin. When I woke up, there was a faint red mark on my palm that day. I covered the mirror with a bath towel. I told myself it was stupid, but I could not bring myself to touch the glass anymore. It stayed covered for hours until I started hearing the faintest thud, thud, thud from the bathroom door. Not knocking, not human, something dull and rhythmic from inside. I pulled the towel down half, expecting to see cracks in the glass, but there was nothing. The reflection looked at me with both eyes perfectly aligned. Once more, it was only when I leaned closer that I realized one thing had changed. The mirrored me's right eye was no longer brown like mine. It was darker, nearly black. The next week, I started noticing something else. It wasn't just the blinking anymore. It was everything about the way it moved. At first, I thought I was imagining the delays. Like when I would lean forward to wash my face, the reflection's head would follow a split second too late, as if it was waiting to see what I would do before copying. The lag was subtle, but enough to feel wrong in that deep animal part of my brain that knows when something is off. Then one night, it happened in reverse. I had been staring into the mirror after brushing my teeth, not for any reason, just lost in my own thoughts. My eyes were unfocused when I saw movement, and I realized it wasn't me that had moved first. My reflection had tilted its head a fraction of a second before I did. It was tiny, but I swear to God it was there. I jerked back so hard I hit the edge of the counter. For a long time after that, I avoided the bathroom unless I had to. Even then, I would keep my eyes down, not letting them meet its gaze. But the thing about avoidance is it only makes the fear worse. I started imagining it moving more when I wasn't looking, twisting its mouth in a shapes mine would never make, pacing in that little glass world, waiting for me to glance up. The first time it smiled, I almost vomited. I had been shaving one Saturday morning, feeling a bit more relaxed, thinking maybe I had just been tired or stressed these last few weeks. I rinsed the razor and looked up without thinking. My lips were closed, but its mouth curled slowly into a grin. It wasn't a pleasant grin either. The corners of its mouth pulled too far up, and the skin at its cheeks, strained like the smile, was a mask stretched too tightly over something else. It held that grin for maybe 3 seconds, then my own mouth twitched upward as if my muscles were following its lead. After that, I couldn't tell if I was me in control or if I was being puppet from the other side. I would catch my own face in the mirror with expressions I didn't feel. Sadness, so deep it made my stomach turn even though I was fine. A look of hunger, though I wasn't thinking about food. Anger that made my jaw ache from how hard my teeth pressed together. Each time my reflection seemed just a fraction more alive, the dreams began next. Always the same room, always the same mirror. I would stand in front of it and see myself, but the mirror world was darker, like a shadow had seeped into every corner. The air was thick there like breathing syrup. My reflection would blink and then keep its eyes closed as if savoring the darkness behind its lids. When it opened them again, its eyes were no longer mine. They were wet and glossy, like something looking through my skin rather than at it. I tried covering the mirror one night, draping an old bedsheet over it and taping the edges down. That lasted 2 days before I woke up to find the sheet neatly folded on the counter and the mirror perfectly clean, without a speck of dust or smudge like it had been polished from the inside. By now, I was starting to dread my own face. I avoided photos, refused to FaceTime friends, ignored any reflective surface I passed. But the more I avoided the mirror, the more I could feel it thinking about me. That sounds insane, but there's no other way to say it. There was this constant awareness pressing at the edges of my mind like an itch under the skin. When I stood too close to the bathroom door, I could feel it standing on the other side, leaning close to its side of the glass. One evening, I heard something I can't explain. I was walking past the bathroom when I heard a soft, wet sound like lips parting after being pressed together for too long. It came from inside. I froze. The sound came again, followed by the faintest whisper of breath. I didn't open the door. I don't think it's copying me anymore. I think it's learning the mirror had become something I avoided in the way people avoid walking past open graves. There was no sense in tempting fate, yet my bathroom was unavoidable, and so was the rectangle of glass above the sink. I told myself I would not look directly into it. I would keep my eyes down at the basin, at the tiles, at anything but that reflective surface. But no matter how much I avoided it, I could feel it feel me. It had been 2 days since the reflection's mouth moved without my own following it. The words were silent, but I saw them form in my copy's lips, and the shape of them suggested something foul, something personal. My name stretched into syllables that seemed to drag across the silence of the room. My chest had gone cold that night. I left the light on and shut the door, but the next morning the mirror's surface was fog from the inside. That word had started to haunt me, because what was inside the mirror, if not me? What was behind it when I saw my bathroom? Walls and light, but also saw it blink when I did not. What else could exist in that thin skin of glass? I started testing it, not with words, not anymore, but with movement. I would stand there in front of the sink and lift my right hand slowly, deliberately, and sometimes it followed perfectly, but sometimes there was that delay, less than a second, but enough to feel wrong, enough to make my stomach pitch. One night, it lifted its left hand instead, not as a reversed image, but as if it were facing me, not copying me. The worst was when it began smiling. In moments when my face was blank, I would stand there brushing my teeth, and my jaw would be still, my lips shut, my mind blank from the morning fog of sleep. And then my reflection's mouth would pull upward, and the teeth would show white and wet, and too many of them. It was during one of those mornings that I decided to shatter the mirror. The thought came without hesitation, without consideration. I grabbed the heavy ceramic soap dispenser and swung with everything I had. The impact cracked the surface in a sharp, ringing echo that seemed too loud for my small bathroom. But the crack did not spread across the glass. Instead, it folded inward like the strike had landed against something not fragile but dense, something that absorbed the hit like a muscle under skin. There was no shatter, no splinter, no rain of silvered shards, just that same smooth surface and the faintest ripple, as if it had been water disturbed by a pebble. The reflection smiled again, but now there was no attempt at copying my face. It leaned closer until its features filled the frame, and I swear its pupils were not round anymore. They were vertical, thin, and glistening. That night, I dreamed of being on the other side. I was in the mirror bathroom, but everything was dim and dust hung in the air, as though the place had not been used for years. The tiles were darker, stained. The sink was rusted, and the light overhead swayed slowly without wind in the dream. I turned to the mirror on that side, expecting to see my room beyond, but instead I saw my real self asleep in bed, my breathing steady, my body still except for my eyes beneath the lids moving and moving, as if something inside me was awake while I slept. When I woke, there was moisture on my pillow, and my breath smelled faintly of glass, like the scent of a window pane heated in summer. The next evening, the mirror's surface had changed in a way that was impossible to miss. Veins thin and pale, like threads of frost, had appeared under the surface, branching from the corners inward, pulsing faintly, not with light, but with some deeper rhythm. I felt in my jawbone. Every time I brushed my teeth, I would see those lines subtly swell. In contrast, by the fourth day, I began catching glimpses of my reflection when I wasn't even near the mirror, in the black of my phone screen before it turned on, in the glass of a bus stop at night, when the street was empty, in the water pooling in the sink after I rinsed my hands. Always that same slight smile, that same vertical slit in the pupils, and always the blink just a fraction too late. I told myself I could endure it until I figure out what to do. I told myself that as long as I didn't acknowledge it too much, it couldn't cross over, couldn't leave that sheet of glass. But the truth was the boundaries were already softening, and I didn't know if it was waiting for something or if it was already in the process of coming through. I stopped using the bathroom mirror 2 weeks ago, but it didn't matter, because whatever was inside, it had learned how to follow me. I had draped an old bed sheet over the glass the day after I saw the reflection open its mouth, while I kept mine closed. But by the next morning, there were wet patches blooming through the fabric, like it had been breathing on the other side, leaving trails that looked almost like the shapes of fingerprints pressing outward. I tried not to touch it, because I knew I would feel something warm. The first night after covering it, I thought I heard scratching in the bathroom, but it was faint, just a light tap every few minutes. I told myself it was pipes settling, or maybe something in the walls. I tried to sleep, but at around 3 in the morning, my phone screen lit up by itself, and I saw the black front camera reflecting my face, and yet the eyes staring back were blinking in an uneven rhythm, like it had learned to reach other reflective surfaces, not just the mirror over. The days that followed, the thing seemed to grow bolder. Every time I passed a dark window, my reflection would linger a split second longer than me. Once in the turned-off television screen, I caught my reflection looking sideways while I was still facing forward. I tried to test it, standing perfectly still and then snapping my gaze quickly to the side. But it was always already looking back at me, like it knew the game and had been waiting for me to realize I couldn't when the worst moment came. 3 nights ago, when I woke up to the sound of breathing in my bedroom, not mine, but wet and uneven, like air moving through teeth, I froze, pretending to be asleep. The breathing stopped for a few seconds, and then from the shadow near the dresser, I heard the faint sound of fingernails dragging down glass, except there was no glass there, unless it was here with me, not trapped anymore. I didn't move until dawn. I tried smashing the bathroom mirror the next day, hoping maybe that would end it. I wrapped my arm in a towel, swung a hammer as hard as I could. But the moment it struck, I felt a resistance, like hitting something soft before it hit something hard. The glass cracked, but not normally. The fracture lines bent in ways that didn't make sense, curling inward toward the center like veins on skin, and a dark liquid began seeping from them, thick and slow. I backed away, but the cracks began to widen, pulsing faintly, and from somewhere inside I saw an eye open, not like a human, but still looking at me. It blinked, and with each blink the cracks widened further. That night I dreamed I was standing in a hallway lined entirely with mirrors, but none of them were showing me. Instead, they showed the other version, moving closer from different angles. Some mirrors showed only its face, others showed its hand stretched out, palm up, like it was inviting me, and I woke with the taste of glass dust in my mouth and the smell of damp metal. Yesterday, I tried leaving the house, driving far away. I didn't care where, just far. But every time I glanced at the rearview mirror, the thing was there in the back seat, sometimes closer, sometimes farther. Once I swear I saw its fingers wrapping around the headrest. I stopped at a gas station, ripped the mirror off, but the absence was worse because in the side window, its reflection stayed perfectly still while I moved, almost like it was considering when to match me again. This morning I woke to find the bedsheet on the bathroom floor, soaked and warm, the mirror uncovered. I could see myself, but the other me was smiling, and my right, I was blinking while its left, I blinked back in a perfect opposite rhythm. Then it stopped smiling and mouthed something I couldn't hear, but I understood anyway. It said, almost done. I think I understand now that it isn't trying to mimic me anymore. It's waiting for the exact moment to trade places. It's been learning my timing, my gestures, my expressions, and soon there won't be a difference, except I will be the one on the other side blinking back while something else walks around in my body. I can already feel it. Sometimes when I blink one, I stays closed a fraction too long, and when I open it again, I see the world slightly different, like I'm looking through glass. I don't know how much time I've left, but if anyone ever notices my blink doesn't match the rest of me, please don't look too long, because if you do, you'll give it another reflection to climb into, and maybe then it won't need mine anymore. I'm not sure if I should cover the mirrors again or leave them open. Maybe it's too late. Maybe I've already been switched and I just haven't realized yet. But every time I close my eyes, I see it looking back from the other side, waiting. And now, when it blinks, I feel my own eyelid move in perfect time. And I know the next time it happens, I might not open them in this world.